Welcome to A Certain Sound Daily Video Devotional, 2 Corinthians chapter 12. We want to deal with Paul's thorn in the flesh. Not here to say what that thorn was, except that it was a messenger of Satan to buffet him. I see 5 things in this particular passage. We're going to read it for you today. Verse 7 of 2 Corinthians chapter 12 says, "And lest I should be exalted above measure, through the abundance of the revelations, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure." He goes on and says, "For this thing I asked the Lord 3 times to be delivered. And he said unto me," in verse 9, aren't you glad the Lord always has something to say to you? He's not going to leave you hanging, you guys. He's going to talk to you. He says, "And the Lord said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness." Paul says, "Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, in distresses for Christ's sake." Now listen to what Paul says. He says the same thing the Lord said to him. A little different words, but it's the same thing. "For when I am weak, then am I strong." He came to that conclusion. Well, that was just what the Lord said. He said, my strength is made perfect in weakness. That's what he told Paul. And Paul says, okay. He says, when I am weak, then I am strong. He's agreeing with God. That's the sign of a man who's growing. That's the sign of a man who gets it. Let me ask, do you and I get it? You know, sometimes we go through problems, trials. It's like a thorn in the flesh. I guess the question I have for myself sometimes is, do I get it? 5 things. Number 1, the problem, a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan. Do you know God surrounds you? Do you know that you are His? Do you know that you are His possession, that you belong to Him? And that thorn in the flesh for Paul was allowed by God. Friend, I want to tell you something today. God surrounds you. God protects you. God has a hedge. But He will never allow Satan to tempt you above what you are able to bear. But He will, with the temptation, make a way of escape that you may be able to hold up underneath that. So relax, God is in control. I see the problem, a thorn in the flesh, but I also see that there's a purpose for this problem. See, God always has a reason for allowing something to come into your life. You may be asking yourself the question, well, why did this happen? Well, Paul says it right here. There's a purpose to it. He says, lest I should be exalted above measure because of the abundance of the revelations that was given to me. In fact, he says it twice. At the end of that verse, he says, lest I should be exalted above measure. Do you know God wanted to keep him from being conceited? He wanted to keep him from being self-righteous. He wanted to keep Paul from allowing his flesh to rise up and his ego to come and get the best of him. Do you know God always has a reason for allowing things in our life? He may not have caused this thorn in that sense. He only allowed it, but he knew what he was doing. You see, Satan has a purpose, and that is to destroy you. But God's purpose, if it's allowed to come to you, God's purpose is always different than the enemy's. The enemy's, is to destroy you. God's is to approve you. It's to build you. It's to make you better and stronger in Him. God has a great purpose in mind for you. Just know that today. Whatever your problem is, if God has allowed something to come into your life like a trial or a necessity, know this. He has a reason for it. He has a reason. He has a purpose. I also noticed that Paul prays about it. God expects us to pray about these things because we need to give Him the glory when the prayer is answered. Paul prays that God would deliver him from this. He prayed 3 times that He might deliver him from it. Now the word 3 or thrice, I understand, is not just 3 times, but it's a word that means over and over again. That Paul prayed over and over again. It's okay to do that. He's letting us know it's all right to pray. But the question is, are we ready for the answer? Friend, God expects me to pray. But when Paul gets his answer, it's in the form of a promise. And what's the promise? The promise is, hey, Paul, my grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made perfect in your weakness. You didn't get the answer you wanted, but I gave you something better. And what's that? The same for you as it is for me. The same for me as it is for Paul. And what was that? My grace is sufficient for you. And that's enough.
Thank you for watching A Certain Sound Daily Video Devotional. Be sure to sign up for the iTunes podcast or daily email of A Certain Sound when you visit us online at www.acertainsound.com. A Certain Sound is a ministry of Word of Truth Christian Center in Bowling Green, Ohio. On behalf of Word of Truth Christian Center, I'm Sonetta. God bless, and we'll see you tomorrow.